Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Starpeace Wednesday. I am super excited to introduce my special guest today, the lovely Belle.
Hi everyone.
Belle is a lovely, well, I don't want to patronize you and say young lady, but I actually met you on our birthday, didn't I? It was the full moon in Leo on the 11th of August, going into the 12th. We were celebrating our dear friend Marta's birthday. And Belle had discovered a whole party was just waiting for her. And whilst I was sitting there, we were all on the beach. There's some lovely music, a fire, etc. Ian and I were there, and up comes Marta with Belle and says, "You've got to hear what this friend of mine has to say. She's an astrologer." And then you came in with like, bam. I'm going to ask you to paraphrase it, but it was what this year was going to be like for the three of us, bearing in mind that this full moon was happening in our on our birthdays. And I was like, who is this? Just to set the scene, like we didn't have a long conversation, did we? And I knew I needed to invite you on. And also you might notice that we are color coordinated, though we had no idea that this was going to occur. Now, Belle is literally 20 years younger than me, right to the day. And you may have listened to Julie Gairland's Starpeace Wednesday talk. If you haven't, please do. She's 20 years ahead of me. I don't think she's the same birthday as me, but when you see these, or you encounter souls along your path that you know are just, I say just aspects of your consciousness, it's just phenomenal, right? It's so exciting when life gets magical like this. And just to remember why we're here in the first place. You know, Starpeace is all about seeding the new earth narrative. We're having a conversation primarily about how astrology can actually help us shift our perspective, particularly in supporting teenagers who are waking up or maybe identify as woke. And we're going to go into that as well in a little bit, to recognize that they are in the right place at the right time, even though they feel like they really don't belong. And this thing that really resonated with me was, I remember I was very unhappy as a teenager. I don't know about you, Belle, we'll check into that in a second, but Julie was very unhappy too. And actually astrology made a huge difference in my life. Like at the time, it helped me to start to see myself as more than what I had learned from my parents. And that was very important because I was switched on from a very young age. I just didn't have the language.
Yeah.
So that's the entry level, but we're going to have a chat about quite a few things, and we're both quite tired today, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm exhausted physically, and like I feel my lids are heavy. I will probably have a nap later.
You won't yet, trust me. I reckon we'll get some good high vibes coming in, so
I could use it.
Let's call our star families in and just invite that this conversation is very energizing for us and for everybody who actually participates in listening and viewing. It's a little reminder to take a deep breath in. And then as you breathe out, send your breath down your body, through your pelvic floor, through your feet, into the earth. And let's make a connection with the crystalline grid beneath us. Take another deep breath into the belly. And as you breathe out, send your tapping root, your anchoring cord down from your tailbone down, spiraling through your earth chakra, down into the very center of Mother Earth. And however you anchor to our core, to the earth's core, maybe you wrap your cord around a crystal core or the roots of the tree of life in the center of the earth, however it feels good to you to make a deep connection so you can rise up. Let's all do that together. Deep breath in. Breathing down the body one more time. Feeling our light and our love just spreading across the planet and into the very center. And then breathe your energy all the way back up through your body. Out through the crown of the head, out through the soul chakra, up through our sun, through the stellar gateway, all the way through our universe, omniverse, right to the point that it circles back round again, comes back down. Oh, there's so many energies that want to connect with us right now.
That was lovely.
So just holding everyone in a sacred space, because when we have these conversations, all sorts of revelations take place. So just allow your mind to relax, become the witness, drop into your heart, invite your soul to lead your perception filters, to lead you into a place where you can receive what you need. And as always, we intend that we are channels of the purest vibrations of love and light, our own higher self-consciousness, for the highest good of all and the win-win-win in everything. Very gently coming back. Feels really good to do that just as we start.
Yes, it does. I do something similar quite regularly. So it was lovely to hear someone else's version of it, actually. Before we get into it, I want to just say something, because I'm not sure you realize I don't know Marta.
Do you not?
No. So my side of this, how we met, I was on holiday for my birthday with my mother for about 4 days in Brighton, and we came down just literally because I found a jumpsuit I liked on Depop and I wanted to try it on in the shop, and I thought, that's what I want to do for my birthday. And my mom was like, okay, let's do it. And I've always wanted to go to a drum circle on the beach, literally since I was a child and I saw one. I've always wanted to go to one and I have never had the chance. And that night, the story is kind of long because it was such a happenstance. We weren't going to go to the beach to look at the moon, me and my mum, because we were very tired and we'd been out all day. And this young man who was staying at the same hostel as us, had lost his key and his phone on the beach. And this other woman at the hostel, who I had met the previous night because I burnt my hand on some tea, really complicated how we all know each other, she was with him and they'd been hanging out, and she and him convinced us to go to the beach to look for his phone and keys. And then when we were walking home, I saw the drum circle and I was like, oh my God, this is my dream. This is exactly what I want to do on my birthday. And I just ran over there and was like, can I sit with you guys? So I didn't know anyone. I don't even live there.
So did your mum not know Marta either?
No, none of us did. Literally none of us knew anyone. I just really wanted to join a drum circle. I didn't know anyone.
That's insane. Because Marta, Marta, she's we're going to have to get Marta on at some point now. Just imagine the three of us, I'm intentionally red, yeah? So I'm dark-haired, same as you, same as Marta. Marta's half Italian. Do you have any Mediterranean blood in you?
I'm half Ashkenazi, which is a type of Jew.
Okay. I was going to say, what is that?
Yeah, I recently did a DNA test and found out that it's a completely different, it's its own ethnic group, which I had no idea about, but my mum's Ashkenazi. And then my dad's just sort of European.
Well, your mum's a very interesting lady too. I'm very much looking forward to connecting with her. But again, I love that you've shared that, because it's the synchronicity of something that is predestined, that isn't when it happens, and how we're actually kind of pointed towards that place that we need to be.
In such small random ways as well. It's like that boy losing his phone led me to this, which is so weird, but also perfect.
But how amazing that the birthdays as well. And it's just the level of, Marta's one of my very deeply spiritual friends, right? So the fact that this is all as it is just marvelous. And one of the things we wanted to talk about today was looking at predestiny and free will. And, obviously you could have said, no, and not gone, but everything was leading you to go, and there this thing happens. And that's the magic of co-creation, when we're in with our higher self frequency. I would say connected to our soul and how we connect to our soul. So do you want to start with the energies of that full moon, so that we can kind of go from there, because that's setting for everyone.
let me just pull it up online. It won't take but a minute, because it's easiest for me when I just read the chart straight up, because it's there's something about the circular chart in astrology that can almost be trance-like.
Do you want me to get you to share screen? I mean, we're doing all this live, but if I can give you permission to share screen, you could bring it up if you want.
It's my birth chart that
oh no, we'll leave it then, don't worry, we'll leave it, no, we'll keep it private.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
Thank you. Just because I don't have time to hide my birth details. If I was less tired and more prepared, I would have done that. So the full moon, just so that everyone knows as well, a full moon is in the chart, it shows up as the sun and the moon being completely opposite each other in the chart, which is obviously how it works. So the sun's shining light on the moon. But this also means that every full moon, there's a kind of tension, and tension's not the best word. There's energy creation going on between the sun and the moon, and they're two polarizing concepts and ideas. It's like lightness in a very external way, like what you shine, and then it's sort of the lightness that you take in, which can be kind of also your dark side. It can be kind of intense, and sometimes what in the human experience we call quite scary. So the thing about a full moon is that it, and a new moon, but full moon more so, it like amplifies everything it touches in the chart. And when this was going on, Saturn and the moon were next to each other, which meant a lot of control over our emotions. So although this full moon, although full moons generally create a lot of emotions and create a lot of emotional energy, this one specifically wasn't. It was being supported by Saturn in a way where our emotions were something we were really understanding at that moment. They were something that we were really considering and that we were using in a structured manner. And then the thing about why this full moon affected us and our birthdays is because in astrology, you have something called a solar return chart. Do you know what that is? Should I explain it? Just
explain it, please.
Just explain it. So a solar return chart is when your sun position in your natal chart goes to the same position again. It's not always on your birthday, although it's normally very, very close to, either like the day before, like 12 hours before you were born, or sort of 12 hours after, anywhere in there. And it's when the sun's at the exact same degree that the sun was at your chart, at your birth, the chart is rewritten, but with what's going on in the sky at the moment. And then the way that relates to your chart is kind of an expansion of how your year is going to go. So you can look at just the solar return chart and see the general energies of the year, where your focus is going to be, etc., etc. And then you can look at your natal chart, and that's how you are, what you have access into in this whole lifetime, not just during one year. And you can relay them over each other, and then you can also see how you're going to react to the energies you have access to for that year, or at least how you would be prone to reacting, or what kind of things inside of you that are like a forever kind of thing change and shift during that year because of what your solar return chart is.
So solar return, did you say it was every 12 years?
No, it's every year. So every year you have a different solar return, because the sun goes one full rotation of the zodiac every year.
So is it like, if I gave the analogy of sort of like you revisit but from a different perspective?
Yeah, very much so. That's a very good analogy.
So
yeah.
My friend Melanie was talking about dimensions in terms of, a 12-story building. For us to understand it, all these concepts are struck just by creating them, they're wrong, and I agree with that, but we need them for our mind to comprehend, right? So I've always talked about going round the mountain and kind of spiraling upwards, so it looks like you're encountering the same thing, but you're in a slightly different perspective, a more elevated one, if you allow yourself to look for that.
Yeah.
Whereas I like, the analogy of sort of the 12-story building is you can kind of work out which one you're on, whereas with the mountain it's not quite like that. It's more like a spiral of joy or a spiral of doom. But for the sake of all of us getting this, there are elements, from what I understand, in our charts that seem like they're pretty fixed, right, about us. They seem, doesn't mean they are, but it seems like they're pretty fixed. And other elements that are more fluid. So is there something in relation to that you're talking about?
It really depends that's the thing with astrology, is that if anyone wants a real answer for themselves, they're going to have to look at their charts, because it's very individual. So almost every natal chart is completely unique. Even with twins, just a couple of degrees change can and does affect charts, so that people are very different. And then whichever specific time relative chart you're looking at, be it a solar return, or there's a lot of variations of things you can do. You can do a return for every single planet. So there's lots of different ways you can look at time relative charts. But just talking about a solar return, every solar return is different. So every year there's going to be a different thing to compare to. Obviously, life is different. Life continues, life changes, life goes on.
It's kind of like the blueprint, if you like, that solar return. Okay, hold on a minute. We don't always have the full moon in our sign on our birthday, do we?
No, exactly.
Right.
So it's special because we had a full moon, which impacts the energy of our year, in that we have the ability to create a lot of energy. And we're doing that partly because we're in control of our emotions this year.
So so for us, it's particularly poignant. Bear with us, folks, because this is like
it's very technical.
Yeah. Astrology is such a huge umbrella term. For most of us, we understand astrology as the sun sign, future prediction for the week in your kind of magazine or newspaper or online. And it's just such a tiny little element and a real distortion of what we're talking about. A lot of people are really into human design these days, which is a totally different system from what I understand. Astrology has been around a very, very long time. What really excites me, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation, is you all know about starpeace. You're here because of starpeace. So the idea is as above, so below. And what is going on the planet is a reflection of what's going on in our solar system, which is then a reflection of what's going on a wider and wider scale in our universe. And although we're being influenced that way, we can also influence this way through our vibration and our opening up. And it's fascinating that, that's the whole thing. So the whole placement of Saturn with that full moon, and the three of us as what do we call it, the three witches of Eastwick, or whatever you want to call it, I think was particularly about, like you said, this ability to control our emotions. Is probably, I'm not sure that's the word I want to use, but to be able to,
it's like give them structure. Saturn is like a nickname for Saturn that goes around in astrology is the strict dad, or like the strict father, the father figure. But in a I'm saying it in a positive light, like given restrictions in order to grow. Yes. So restriction to our emotional side, but it's not just our emotional side. The moon represents so much more. So Saturn is conjunct the moon in this particular full moon. The moon is also our subconscious, like it's also our shadow self. So giving structured restriction and therefore structured support to all the shadow parts of who we are and what we're trying to figure out leads us to like a much deeper understanding of that.
And it was a supermoon, wasn't it, as well? So the effect on the
collective. It was, yeah.
How would you say, beyond us, and now our experience there, because I wanted to share this with the collective, because obviously whatever's happening for any of us who are transmitting information to the collective, whether it's you with your astrology and what you do online, etc., whether it's me, these are opportunities for this energy to ripple out and to support everybody that we know we're in touch with, like you, to also have this experience. So for the collective, aside from when their birthday was, that particular full moon, what's the kind of impact over the year like for them?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I will answer it, but before I do, I will say, again, it depends on your natal chart and where the moon falls in your natal chart. So this particular moon was in Aquarius. Oh, sorry, my dogs are barking. I hope you can't hear them.
It's fine.
The sun was in Leo, obviously, well, they're opposite in the chart. And Venus had just moved into Leo. So it was at 0 degrees of Leo. So I found that pretty impactful looking at my solar return. And it is pretty impactful because it's at 0 degrees. So there's like infinite potential. and Venus is all about what we value. People often just sort of sideline it to like love and relationships, but it's what we value. Like we pick our relationships based on what we value. So it's a refreshing and a renewing of discovering what we value. And being in Leo and Aquarius, the sun and the moon, it's very much about what we value about ourselves that we're showing other people, and how we're comprehending everyone else. Because Aquarius is very much, Leo is very much about the self. It's very self-oriented, and I'm not saying that like in a narcissistic way at all. Leos, I mean, I'm a Leo obviously because like this was my birthday. Leos are excellent signs. But Leo's also, the archetype of Leo is very much about your own personal creative power and like developing that as an individual. And Aquarius is the flip side of that. It's very much about the collective and being detached from the self so that you can serve the collective. So this is such interesting energy. Go on.
Yeah, no, with that, but this leads me perfectly into what I've been banging on about for a little while, which is the current energies. I just did an energy update for where we are currently. So I am not an astrologer, but I always do new moon co-creations, and I do full moon world service, personal healing, light language every month. I've been doing this for a very long time. What I say is with the new moon, we're seeding a personal intention, right? And we're clearing our kind of personal resistance up as quickly as we can towards that intention. And with the full moon, between those 2 weeks, all the kind of resistance that's in us, in our subconscious, in our shadow, and therefore in the collective that we resonate with, comes to the surface. So we have this wonderful opportunity to heal that, well, to bring love and light to the shadow when it comes up. So, you know, we just seeded the new moon in Libra. I am divine harmony. We're very much in the equinox energy until we get to the solstice, right? The December solstice. And we've now got a new moon in Aries coming, full moon in Aries coming up, which again, is that kind of microcosm, macrocosm, because the Aries is another fire sign, you know, very much about the personal will. The Libran energy is more, you know, what's the harmony, the balance here. There's all sorts of elements we could go into, which I'm not going to go into right now. But ultimately, the axis of me and the collective, as in ego, my personal journey, my personal desire, and the collective is what I distinguish as personal paradise, getting really clear on that. What is my personal harmony frequency that I really want to vibrate at? And then the impact that has on the collective. When you talk about personal will, you know, this is why I really wanted to talk about this, because as the driving force, if you like, a star piece, that whole energy that got seeded with that full moon is going to be a big part of what I'm sharing this year, you know, with everybody in our collective. And the idea of having, you know, structured support, this idea that the kind of challenges that you're going to encounter are very specific to allow you to actually receive what you desire, is very much absolutely in line with the co-creation practices I teach in my coaching. Which is you put your soul in control. So you call your higher self-consciousness in. You then get clear on your intention. What is it you want to experience? And you don't just go, I want this. You go, right, why do I want it? What do I feel that's going to give me? Like you refine that intention. Then you get
darker aspects of why.
There's dark light, there's all sorts, right? There's the lower level of the desire and the higher octave. So we do this self-inquiry, we do what's in our conscious control. We then allow the subconscious resistance to come up. And this is the difference between what am I here to sort out? What other problems have I got to fix? The endless looking for something because we feel we're essentially broken and we need fixing, to shifting that and saying, hold on a minute, I've got a soul blueprint that I have chosen for this life, my curriculum, which I believe is very linked to the chart that we have. It is the chart at birth. There's a big way you can get a lot from that, the natal chart, that tells you, one, what's in helping you, and what's hindering you is still also helping you, because it's there to help you hit the mark, what you have intended to have.
Yeah, wait, sorry. One of the things I wanted to mention specifically to do with astrology is that it's not deterministic. It really isn't. And if you've got something in your chart that some astrologer says, oh, that's bad, don't listen to them. because there is strength in everything in your chart. There is always something it's intentionally there for you to learn how to heal it in this lifetime. There is an incredible theory that I actually don't really know where it started, that everyone's natal chart, they pick that out because that's what their soul is capable of healing in this lifetime. So your natal chart is a blueprint of healing for you that then ripples out through time and space to heal everyone else.
Oh, I love it. Now, are you starting to feel more energized now?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, like this is the flow, and it's just so exactly that. So we're moving beyond this dualistic idea that we don't have the power to co-create something different, to make lemonade from lemons, basically. We're moving beyond this old deterministic mindset, which actually is reflected in science as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Epigenetics is really blasting out of the water so much of what we were all taught in school was real, right, in terms of established science. And it's going, well, no, it isn't. It's not about genetic determinism at all. It's about how we perceive our environment and how our genes get turned on or off responding to that. So if we look at our map, if you like, which is our natal chart, as the gift that we laid out for ourselves. I'm coming from the perspective that we choose our parents.
Me too.
We choose our circumstances of birth. We choose the major life experiences that occur in early life. They're predestined in the sense that whether our parents are going to stay together or not, whether someone's going to die or not, all of that kind of thing is very much the circumstances we choose to trigger these lessons. And what so many of us do, especially starseeds, is, well, as a starseed, you're here bringing that higher frequency to a lower density planet, right? But what can happen is we really get lost along the way, and the way we perceive things is from that perspective that we don't have power to change them. And that's what I'm really hearing from you, is actually we do.
Oh yeah, we definitely do. And I think I'm also of the belief that we come here and we choose our parents and that we make specific soul contracts. So yes, in life some things are destined to happen to us, but what makes astrology specifically not deterministic is that we get to choose how we respond to that. So we get to choose how we respond to our upbringing. We get to choose how we respond to hurts and traumas that have happened to us. And it's not always an easy choice. In fact, most of the time, it's one of the hardest choices you'll ever make. And also recognizing that you have that choice can be extremely difficult, because feeling helpless gives you a lot of excuses. And as soon as you specifically decide to stop feeling helpless, you've got no more excuses. And then you have to take responsibility. And this is something I went through fairly recently, like about a year ago now, exactly that. And it was a real moment in my life. Yeah. But I learned that lesson hard. And now I recognize that if I'm upset about something, it's because I'm choosing to be upset about it. But also I am learning something from the upset. So I'll be upset about something and I'll choose to be upset. And I'll be like, I'm upset for a reason, to learn something, but I'm still upset, and that's fine. Yeah.
You're owning how you actually feel, but not necessarily creating a story that you need to dramatize around it. It's the difference between going through an experience that you're feeling in this moment versus tying it up with a whole load of other experiences that felt similar and creating a whole narrative around that.
You're now tying yourself to the past. Exactly. When you do that, and then you get stuck in the same cycles. If you can recognize you're feeling bad for a specific reason, and you're like, oh, actually it's valid, you can decide to shift that reason or do something about it, or just decide to stop feeling bad about it. There's so many options. Like, that's the whole point. We've got options.
Yeah. And that, I think this is the thing, is I want to come back to what you said about the twins in a second, because I think that's fascinating. It answers some questions I haven't really been able to understand before. But the idea of actually not being a victim, and all this is really important, because if we talk about personal paradise, if we talk about collective paradise, if we talk about being a conscious co-creator of our reality, or a divine human, or any of the things we like the sound of because they sound sparkly and wonderful, with that comes the fact that you can't take your old way of showing up as I'm helpless with you into a new world where actually you realize you're not. Yes, like when we look at key events that occur, for example, they are almost like a soul agreement by the people that are all affected, right?
I think you can kind of, with hindsight and sometimes in the moment, I think and feel that often you know when that's happening. Yeah. Often there's some part of you that's like in your core, you're like, you just know that it's something you need to, something that's there on purpose.
Yeah.
Even if it seems like a kind of not great thing. I know I experienced that throughout my teenage years. Specific things would happen and it'd be horrible, but I'd still be like, it just felt not out of place, if that, you know?
Absolutely. And I think, look, I want to put this in perspective for everybody. You're 24 years old currently,
yeah.
right?
No, I'm 25. I turned 25.
You turned 25
on that birthday.
Cool. So the fact that we're sharing perspectives with quite big gaps between, our ages, if you like. But, there's 21 years between me and my daughter. Is she now of the belief that we choose our parents? And the person, I'm not sure if she's there yet. I'm not sure if she ever will be there. And that's her free will. And I totally respect that. But it's like what I've noticed is between generations, we kind of are like, what's going on? I don't get that generation. But actually, it's not even a whole generation. It's like 10-year increments. Things are shifting so quickly, right? And I want to talk a little bit about this in relation to woke and awake, but just going back to the twins thing, that's really interesting that even just a minute or so of like difference between the birth, because I was thinking, how is it if they've both grown in the same womb with the same mum? So the mum's emotions, like as hormones, will have been absolutely the same for both of them, right? So how is it that they are different?
I got asked this question just 2 days ago, but it was phrased a bit differently. And I said, oh, you're asking the twins question. So this man said to me, I just told him that I did astrology. And he was like, so if I was born at the exact, he asked me what you needed to know about astrology to get the chart first. But he was like, if I was born the exact date, the exact time, the exact same place, everything exactly the same, my chart was exactly the same as another person's, what determines the difference between us? And I explained it to him like this: you've got a chart, you've got your placements. Every placement has a state of being. It has a low vibrational state, or what you would call like a negative state, a bad state, like an underdeveloped state, all those kinds of negative words. It's got that kind of version and expression that could be not so nice and a bit toxic and stuff. But you also have the complete opposite of that. You've got the highest vibration of expression of that placement, of that particular sign in that particular house, of everything. And that can literally be so amazing. I mean, even the negative, quote unquote negative placements have their intention and have their use and have their own specific kind of power as well. But it's what choices we make going through life that affect who we become. So I said to this man, if you had two people with the exact same chart, at about 5 years old, they'd probably be very, very similar. Obviously, their parents' charts are going to be different, and that would affect them, but they're going to be very similar. And the older they get, the more their small decisions start to make the path between them wider. Does that make sense? Every small decision puts you on a slightly different path. Timelines are very strange and weird, and time is not linear. And the more small decisions you make eventually lead to bigger decisions, which maybe seem like small decisions. And it just gets more like, it's like a snowball of who you are. And with twins, what I've found really interesting with twins, especially like identical twins who have literally the same chart, like a couple of seconds apart or a couple of minutes, and their parents both have the same chart as well, they're being raised by the same parents, is that they tend to unconsciously choose one or the other expression. So I'm not going to say like you have an evil twin, you have a good twin, because it's not like that. But there's 10 planetary placements. So let's just say that just to make it really simple, one twin unconsciously picks to have the positive expression of 5 of them, and the other twin has the other 5, and then the first twin has the negative expression of the other 5. And do you see what I'm saying?
I get you. Yeah.
They unconsciously choose this, like, as children, because they'll play with each other, twins, even in the crib, and they'll sort of mirror each other and bounce off each other. So where one lacks, or I feel like lack isn't even the right term, where one is one version, the other sort of picks up the slack of the other version, which is why, yeah. So twins is a really interesting thing, but that is how it works. Essentially, you choose the vibration of your placements, consciously or unconsciously, just depends on where you are in your life. Then you live out through that.
You've said something really important, which I want to highlight, which is it's, make one small change. It's the little decisions you make that lead to the bigger shifts in timeline. And if there's one thing I remember a very wise friend of mine saying when I felt like I was stuck in a loop in my life, and, it didn't make sense until I'd done a lot of deconstructing and clearing of my energy field, but it was just do one small thing differently. So, if you, for example, always text a guy after you've gone on a date and, you really like them, you always text first, don't. Just do something different. Just change one thing, right? Do one thing differently, and it's the butterfly effect that shifts things. The other interesting thing to speak to there, because, helping people deprogram from this idea of genetic determinism, I think is so important, because there's still loads of stuff out in the media about we're looking for a gene for this and we're looking for a gene for that and we're putting research into this, and it's like money being thrown down the toilet, really, or making some people very wealthy, not ever going to find what they're looking for, and they know it. So it's a part of our awakening. We'll get to wake and woke, is this awareness of whether we're willing to be open to our perception being challenged. And I remember in a couple of my areas of expertise are around fertility, pregnancy, birth, these early infancies and how they shape us. And I remember hearing about a story about twins who had ended up living very different lives. They'd had the same early programming, which is actually a very abusive, if you like, unloving family start, and one of them ended up on the streets with drug addiction, became a prostitute. The other one, and this is real, this is not a sort of story per se, it is a true experience. The other one ended up having a family, very loving husband, children, all of that. And when they were both asked why they think that they ended up where they did, they both basically said, well, with a background like the one I had, how could I have ended up anywhere else? And
choices and reactions.
Yeah. So, the lens we see through, my friends, is really, really important. And I feel we have this, well, it's systemic in all cultures not to be selfish, right? To think of others before yourself. And actually, one thing I'm intending to do through this conversation, maybe not in all cultures, but in the collective, is greater good, right? That's the conditioning we've had. We've had it through wars. We've had it through all sorts that have gone on through all of history. One thing that I feel is very important is to understand that, and when we do tend to our inner garden and what we feel we want and need for ourselves to thrive, this has this knock-on effect, which allows us to be more aware of the needs of others and to meet them because we're meeting our own. Do you want to speak?
100%, 110%. Could not have said truer words.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now let's go to the tricky bit, the woke and the awakening. Okay. So I kind of want to have this conversation with quite a few people now. From what I
understand, you haven't, am I gathering?
We touch on it in different places, because it's like, oh gosh, how to create a fence in a mini second, especially when, from my perspective, and it's just my perspective, I see there's an awful lot of sensitivity in the woke world, right? In terms of that's not right and that's not fair and you shouldn't do this and all of that. But I don't want to judge that. I just want to say it's a natural pendulum swing from ignoring things for so long that actually people are really offended and sensitive. And go on.
Can I just say, often I think the overcompensation at the beginning of your journey is because you feel guilty that you didn't realize these things were going on before. But I would also like to add, most people start this journey, at least nowadays, how I've experienced it growing up, around sort of 17 to 19. You were literally a child. before that. It was not your responsibility to find out about these things. It was not in any way your fault that you didn't know any better, because like Rosie has said, parental conditioning is real, and it happens, and you choose it on purpose, and that's for a reason. So perhaps it was to become so hyper aware of things that, you know, then you can balance out a bit later.
I'm just loving hearing you go. I'm like, I don't know if, well, I know when everyone listens to this, like, I get so excited when you see the quality of consciousness move through generations and get built on. So I'm just going to ask you now, as a 25-year-old, to describe to me as a 44-year-old, what does woke mean from your perspective?
Do you want the definition of the word, or do you want my perception of how it could be?
Give me both. Give me both.
Okay.
Yeah.
The definition of the word woke is, in my opinion, performative awareness. Being woke is being aware of what's going on in the world in order to maintain social standing in some regard. The social standing, I say social standing, I should be saying social currency. Being performatively aware of what's happening in the world doesn't really help you. Knowing what's going on the other side of the world, and knowing that it's terrible and awful and there's nothing you can do about it, or very little you can actually physically do about it. Yeah, sure, you can send money. Yeah, sure, you can send aid to charity, but you don't really know where your money's going. You don't really know where these things are going. You don't really know what's happening on the other side of the world. All you know is what the media is feeding you. And yes, you could be looking at alternative media, but there's no real way to guarantee that that's true either. So knowing all these things on the other side of the world and posting about them to your social group, what that's actually giving you is social collateral. It's making you seem like a good person. And everyone wants social collateral because we are social creatures and we want to be loved and accepted, and that's completely valid and fine. Yes, but it would be ideal if we could all be loved and accepted for being our authentic self, which sometimes is a bit nitty gritty and sometimes just doesn't really give a fuck about what's going on the other side of the world, because it truly doesn't affect our lives. Now, that sounds really harsh and cruel, but I don't care because it's true.
Say it, sister. Say it. Say it.
Yeah, that's how I perceive woke.
I really respect that, because I've looked at definitions. I see, you know, what I see and what concerns me is how things that are initially a good idea, like movements that start, and now I have to be aware of this with starpeace as well, then get hijacked and infiltrated and utilized, whether it's controlled opposition or whatever. And, you know, we can talk about Extinction Rebellion. We can talk about, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. And please do not think that I don't mean that that is a really, really important movement, because it is. It's just at the time that it was all kicking off, there was such confusing signals going on in terms of wearing masks, bowing, you know, like literally getting on one knee. And this is the time for us all to reclaim our sovereignty and own the injustices that have occurred through our ignorance of what's going on, through our potential compliance, through the brainwashing that we've all, you know, every culture is indoctrinated with certain stories, and it creates the chip on the shoulder, it creates the division, the xenophobia, all of that. You know, I think a really important thing to mention is that most of these movements and these different things that I'm kind of referencing that people use as what I call performative awareness, they do not have bad intentions. They started out with the best of intentions, but the thing is that we're living in a global community, and at the same time we're not. Like, we're living our actual physical lives where we live, like in the town we live in, around the people, our neighbors. But that's such an old-fashioned concept nowadays. People are living on their phones with people hundreds of miles away, and that's their daily life. Like, it's global, which is so stressful on the human body. We're not really designed for that physically. And I think a lot of people, like, I think there's a choice to be made with whether you're going to be swept up with globalization or trying to enliven and envision
your direct community as like a bigger thing. So, and I'm specifically mentioning this because as a young person, this is why. So you talk about
you're being ageist. Hold on, you're offending me.
I'm not being ageist, I promise. So you're talking about as above, so below. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. It's like the macroism, microism concept, which I'm very interested in and do also subscribe to. And so in the same breath as it's ultimately going to help everyone around us to heal ourselves and focus on ourselves, I am personally believe that focusing on our community that is actually physically around us will also ultimately help globally, because if more small communities cherish human connection, they're just going to cherish the human connection between each small community. It's almost like if you heal yourself as a person and therefore you can help heal your family, and then your community heals itself, they can therefore heal communities around it, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But when you're swept up in globalization, which is such a common experience as a young person, it just distorts all of what's going on and just gives you so much anxiety.
You've just said it, because this is the point that I'm seeking to help. Well, my part of my mission, if you like, is to really shine the spotlight on this. Is if we have a passion for something on the other side of the world, something that matters to us, etc., that's great, because actually just by us shifting our focus and seeing something, it's no longer unseen, which that shifts it, because noticing fixes more than fixing. Just the awareness of bringing awareness to it shifts things, right? Something has to, you put the light on where there was only dark or shadow. However, the effect for those of us who are in a process of awakening, which is all of us, right? Whatever we call ourselves in terms of labels, because one of the things I really see with the woke movement is a real attachment to labels, which is, I can understand there is a need for that compartmentalization, individualization, although it's not really individual because they're all mini clubs, right, that have their own rules. But it's almost like you have to separate to reconnect. So I get the value of the process, right? But what concerns me is, and look, my analogy is when I was a child, just watching Bambi, Charlotte's Web, Dumbo, and all of those little things, I used to go to bed at night praying for all of these animated beings because they'd lost their mummies, and I was so upset they'd lost their mummies or this had happened or whatever. I used to just spend going to sleep anxiously crying for them and praying for them because I was so concerned. Now, that might seem really stupid, but that was my truth as a young girl, right? Now, I'm seeing teenagers and young adults freaking out about things that are going on around the world. Their nervous system is in a spin. They feel like they can't do anything about it. They're trying desperately to change the outside, not realizing that actually that worry and angst and anger and needing
it's all going out back further into the outside,
it's creating more of the distortion we don't want. Whereas just by taking charge of your own energy, which is exactly what I teach in my work, you know, you can start with just yoga on a Monday night, folks, but start, you know, this whole point is being your own inner authority. It takes practice. You can't just choose it and go, oh yeah, that's what I am, because everything in you is wired to give your power away externally. So actually mastery is about being able to go, yeah, all those really awful things are happening and I do really care about them. I know the one thing that I can do,
choosing to focus on myself.
Let me settle my vibration and let me come, because we come from our pain bodies. Whether we're vegan, whether we're fighting for social justice, whether it's the environment, whether it's animal welfare, whether it's gay rights, whether it's LGBTQI and everything else that comes with it, whether it's feminism, whatever matters to us, if we are shooting from the hip of our own unresolved pain, we only create more pain in the collective. It's really simple. It's a formula. If you do that inner resolution and own your shit, which is basically not trying to sort something out with another person that you've had a disagreement or an argument with or whatever, sort it out in you first. What's got triggered? What's going on? What is the resolution that you want? Then you start to affect things in the unseen world, which has this ripple effect in the seen world. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Definitely.
So when we look at, you know, I see the thing that concerns me is particularly democratic governments or parties seeking to get with the woke, as being down with the trumpets, as I'll say, which is so out of date and everyone laughs at me. You know, we need to be aware at this point of a couple of things. Discernment, which I feel means don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So don't kill the messenger, right? It's like, be aware that not all that glitters is gold. There's so many cliches here. And the wolf in sheep's clothing. So those that look like they're showing up, where, you know, we've got a new female prime minister. We can say, yay, empowerment to the female. Yeah, we've got a female prime minister. Woo, woo. Except let's look at her background a little bit. Let's look at the fact that she's saying the answer to our environmental problems is fracking. Let's look at what she used to do for a living, which was be on the board of, I don't know which energy company and so on, fuel company, etc., etc. So what do you want to say to that?
Something kind of completely unrelated, but also not. I made a conscious decision at like 14, when all my friends were starting to get into politics, to like never get into politics. So I don't even know that the Prime Minister's changed. I was not aware of that until you literally just told me. We have a TV in my house, but we only ever watch occasional movies together on it. I don't watch the news. I don't follow any news on any of my social medias. I don't read the news literally ever, and I haven't since I was 14. And I consciously made that decision because I tried to watch the news for about a week to keep up with my friends. And every time I did, it put me in a horrible mood. And I thought, I'm trying to keep up with people who aren't even that nice to me, who I'm fully aware that they'll not be in my life in 5 years' time. And I'm putting myself in a shit mood every day to do it. And I just was like, nah, I'm not going to. And I haven't. So that's what I've got to say to that.
But
politics is a distraction.
It's more of the puppetry, right? Like when we look at things from different perspectives, it's very interesting because we are the external characters as much as we are the internal characters, right? The personal, you know, everything. Wendy's podcast was very interesting on that, if anyone wants to reflect on that. But I feel this is where we bridge woke and awake. Woke is, I've got to stay plugged into everything and be aware and like make some kind of impact in the world because I have a choice. I can use my energy in the right way, except my energy is being manipulated all the time by fear signaling and very scripted and prescriptive perception filters that are very much the third dimension, staying into your consciousness. Whereas when you choose the path of awakening, which may come from woke to awakening, like however we get there is,
I think it often does. Yeah, I've seen it.
It's the unplugging from what seems to be the reality around us, the unplugging from trying to stay on top of it all, and actually really coming into your vibration setting, selective. This is where starpeace comes in, right? Because starpeace as a concept, the concept that I'm intending to grow into a viral concept is, you know, we put our focus on something, we know we're energizing it. So we have the power, it's in our conscious control to consider what we share as posts, what we like, what we comment on, how we comment. You know, that is a personal responsibility thing that can make a big difference, right? But when we actually look at this from the point of view of vibration, what you're saying is you are choosing to unplug from external factors that are just being broadcast to you, affecting your vibration. You're very aware of how it affected you and being very selective about what you give your attention to, whether that's a song, a radio station, a podcast, a
anything,
TV show, a movie,
anything. Even the people I'm around, I'm very selective. I must say, it's been a journey. I haven't always been selective about everything. I've learned lessons. I've learned hard lessons from not being selective, had gut feelings about people, ignored them, ended up having a really rubbish friend for 6 months. Like, it's happened. I don't regret it because every single one's taught me. If there was one thing I could say to a teenager in any way, shape, or form similar to how I was as a teenager, or any teenager, if they're willing to listen, any young person, any person younger than me, is trust your gut, trust your intuition. Ultimately, I'm sure many young people have heard this because you've got the internet nowadays. There's so much information available to you guys that you're inundated with it. It's so much. But ultimately, the only person who has to live with you is you. You're the only person who's going to have to live with the decisions you make forever. So follow your gut. And I have a mini rant to go along with this, is that following your gut and trusting your intuition and knowing what that is a learning process in our society, because our society is specifically designed to shut down your intuition. The way school systems work, the way we're indoctrinated into school systems, I fucking hated school. Even if you love school because your friends are nice, the actual system of school is training you to be a 9-to-5 wage slave who is happy to just be miserable for 8 hours of their day. And that's ridiculous.
For some material gain at the end, which might be a pair of trainers or a TV or
something you don't really want anyway. You're just getting to keep up with your friends who are just doing the exact same thing to keep up with you. So I would say trust your gut, trust your intuition, and trust the process of figuring out what that looks like for you. When you make a mistake because you didn't trust your gut or your intuition, just be like, okay, I made a mistake. Now I'm going to take responsibility for that mistake and deal with it. And, you know, if you need help, ask the trusted adults in your life for help. Because if you make a mistake and you come to one of them and you're like, I fucked up, I need some help, most likely they're going to want to help you. It's going to be coming from their perspective. So again, trust your gut and your intuition. You are the own authority in your life. Even at like 13, ultimately you are the own authority in your life.
Yeah.
You know, and something else that I don't know if all young people realize, because I always knew this, and it was a bit of a like moment for me when I realized other people didn't know this. When you're like 11, when you're like 12, when you're like 6 years old, literally no adult can tell you what to do. No adult can ever tell you what to do. I don't think any adult ever had an easy time telling me what to do as a kid. Like I would just do whatever I wanted all the time, because I just knew that there was actually nothing they could do about it. Like I could do what I wanted and there was nothing they could do about it. And that's just true. Like it might not seem like it. That might seem like such a simplistic way to say it. But ultimately, you can do whatever you want. You just have to be responsible for the consequences of what you're doing and be willing to accept that.
Yeah.
So as long as you are like, you go do you go be your authentic self and enjoy the messy process that it is to figure out what your authentic self is.
I love what you've just said there. And I think that's so powerful because, you know, whether we call it what you call a mistake, I would say is a misalignment. And I'm just so excited about the future of conscious parenting. You know, I know you've had a really great influence in your mum in your life, and I know you're very close with each other, and she's awake, right? So she's been able to support you to see beyond the illusion, right? That's what I've learned so far. Am I on the right path with that?
We've helped each other, I think. We've been through a lot as a family, and me and my mum have always been close, yes, but that's not to say we never had arguments. Like there was like a month when I was like 15 where I just didn't talk to her, which was very tense and awkward. But like we've been through it as mother and daughter as well. So like we've gotten to the point where she respects my sovereignty and I respect hers. And if we're in some kind of tension, I say like, hey, you're stepping on my toes a bit, obviously with more words than that. But I am very lucky in the sense that my mum always believed we were all individual human beings. She never tried to live vicariously through me, for example. She never tried to control or overly control my decisions. Many other adults did, though. I think because she didn't, I think they saw that and it made them uncomfortable. So I had a lot of teachers throughout my life, and also just other adults I knew who would try in a not so light-handed way to influence my decision making. And I saw through it every time, because my mother who raised me was not like that.
Now that is, I think this is so important for people to grasp, because my background is in education. I studied education and environmental studies for my degree at uni, with the intention of becoming a teacher. So actually looking at the history of how education was created was literally to create blue collar workers. That is the whole point. And depending on whether you have private school or state school, you're literally, it's a different level that you're being plugged into. You know, are you going to be leading the factory workers, or are you going to be a factory worker doing as you're told? That's basically what it comes down to, right? Whatever that factory is, we can say corporation these days. So when you actually, you know, my childhood experience was to be shamed into compliance, whether it was school, whether it was parents. I had very dominating parents, like particularly my mum. I didn't have a relationship with the word no, though. The word no is what got the wooden spoon broken on my bum and got my face slapped by my mum, and the shaming and all the rest of it. But did I actually pay attention? No. From the age of 13, I was doing exactly what I wanted, which I played by the rules enough so I could get away with what I wanted to, which was basically sneak out, drink, smoke, have sex, steal money from my mother's purse. I want people to know I did this, right? Because that was my journey of misalignment, and actually how I coped with being in a world where I was being forced to comply, whether it was covert or overt. In this current times, it's much too easy to call childline and go, my parents are being abusive towards me. But when I was having challenging times with my daughter, if she didn't want to go to school, you know, in my generation, you just pull the kid out of bed, get them into the car, you're going to school, right? But if I did that to her, that would have been abusive, right? And yet you've got the school going, you have to send her to school. And I'm like, well, she won't get out of bed. How do I do this? And then, you know, it's one of those situations, I think so many parents who have children who are awake enough that they don't want to comply are having to face. But that's a whole other podcast. We'll leave that for now.
Yeah, that is a huge topic, and very much an important topic.
Yeah.
And you can see it in charts as well to some degree. In the natal chart, it's normally there's somewhere for everyone where you're like, this just doesn't sit with me, how society is doing this.
No. Yeah. And we're all here as system busters. So if people are interested in us having that conversation more about dealing with what one could say is typical teen behavior, which is to question authority and, you know, seek your own individual way and everything else, but also needing to be part of the tribe, and how we can actually create something from, if we know what the problem is. I don't want to focus on the problem, I want to focus on the solution. The problem is being conditioned to comply. The solution is being given the opportunity to trust our own authority. Because even when you were talking about the gut and your intuition, I was like, it just reminds me when I was younger, when they used to say, oh, just follow your heart. You know what's right for you in here. I'm like, well, I don't fucking know. Otherwise, I would be asking you. And it's the gut. You mentioned this, and I just want parents to be particularly aware of it, because, you know, very often you are paying and making the choices for your teens and young adults as to what money gets spent on. But
I have another thing to add in a second, but go on.
The gut is from even before we're born attacked, you know, medication in pregnancy, medication in drugs, in the actual labor, the different, I don't even want to go into it, but the different things they give you, the different antibiotics, all of that. Our gut is under attack from before we're even born, because they know 80% of your immune system's in your gut, right? It is the second brain. And when you mess with it, you mess with that ability to tune into your intuition, your inner teacher. And we've got all the gender bending chemicals, we've got you know, endocrine disruptive chemicals, which are the gender bending chemicals, you've got plastics, you've got all sorts of things that are trying to distort, including hormonal contraception. Now, I'm not saying don't get it, but I am saying there are alternatives that are brilliant, and depending on who you speak to, you're going to get a different perspective as to what might work for you. So it's not just those that you go to for sexual health advice down certain clinics. There are very wise women and wise souls that can support you to understand your cycle in a different way. There is I can't remember what the there is an app that's brilliant that is all about tracking your cycle and is as effective as the pill, apparently. So just wanted to put that out there. Back to you and your point, and we'll then wrap it up.
My point was to expand on the gut and just say that, yes, again, it is the second brain. Something like your gut has something like 7 times as many nerves as your brain does. So in a way, your gut is actually your first brain. And I would also like to say that the way we are taught about food at school is another huge part of, you know, training us as human beings to comply. And it leads into the wokeness thing, because something that really destroys gut health, if you're not doing it right, is being a vegan or being a vegetarian. And it's very publicly supported at the minute. It's being pushed by the government. Lab grown meats are a thing now, not like in stores, but they are a thing. And part of what's being pushed to young people about veganism and vegetarianism is that it's better for the environment. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people who don't eat meat because they just can't bring themselves to eat an animal. My brother is like that. And if it's your decision, like I say, you know, take what resonates, as the tarot readers on YouTube say, because ultimately you're the authority in your life. But to be truly good for the environment through your food is to eat locally as much as possible. And to support your own gut biome is to eat foods that sit well with you, even if that's a nice juicy steak and that goes against the social performative aspects of being woke.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I forgot and I would have been gutted if I listened back. So you speaking to something that's so important that it gets looked at. Now, there is a very big difference between veganism and vegetarianism that is reliant basically on what we would call processed food, which is the stuff that's being promoted. Now, if you just take a moment to get beyond the initial reaction to this and go, how can something that has 100 ingredients in it be better for me than something that has 1 or 2?
It's easier for your gut to digest the simpler ingredients that the gut is biologically designed to digest, and it helps all the different collectives of microbiomes within your gut be healthy, interact with each other in a positive way, and thus feed your nervous system and your brain positively. Exactly.
And I'll give you an example that I know firsthand, because my husband is he's a hunter. So he is responsible for supporting the deer culling that goes on in this country. Now, me 6 years ago couldn't even conceive of getting together with a man who, never mind ate meat, but actually, you know, would kill an animal, right? I just couldn't have got it, because I was fervent veggie, plant-based, all of that. And it was actually a health journey that took me to being a pure carnivore for a year and making peace with the shadow me that didn't want to eat meat, but knew I needed it to repair my gut and my brain. And honestly, that's another story. But essentially, here's something to understand, is that the current ecosystem balance that exists means that if you actually stop culling deer, you'd have no forest land left in certain areas, right? And that's true for different animal populations around the planet. And we are misguided at times when we're trying to stop something and not realize the impact and the effect down the food chain and up the food chain and the ecosystem at large.
Yes.
Whether you agree with me or not about this is a different story, but actually the whole thing about wild meat, we know, is it's infinitely better for you than the processed meat. We know we don't want suffering. Why would suffering be a part of anything if we can avoid it, right? Doesn't need to be there. But equally, we have to accept that something that's full of hydrogenized vegetable oils, palm oil, genetically modified ingredients, synthetic ingredients, sugars, salts, E-numbers. Have you ever looked at a packet of tortilla chips that are just normal tortilla chips versus the gluten-free, free-from range ones? I challenge you to go and look at the ingredients, right? And see one has 2 or 3 ingredients in and one has about 10, 15. And you ask the question, what's that all about? Yeah. What is that all about? right?
That is so very relevant to something I've just gone through, but I won't bring it up here. That'll be a private conversation. But I would like to add that I was a vegan for a very long time as a teen, quite young. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was not eating healthy, and I was so unhealthy. I can't tell you guys how unhealthy I was. I was overweight. I was miserable. I was depressed and anxious, and like every single list of things that is wrong with, you know, you because of your gut health, I had it. And I was like, what's wrong with me? I don't understand why I'm not well, because I'm doing everything I'm being told is the right thing to do to be healthy. I was eating nothing but vegetables and fruit. Like, it's not like I was eating processed food even. I was just eating vegan food, but it was all, like you say, oils, and it just wasn't whole foods. Ultimately, I have come to believe, at least for me personally, that whole foods are the best thing for me and my health. And I am yet to see a person who has genuinely tried to only eat whole foods, like switched from a vegan or a vegetarian diet, or even just like what you call a normal diet, to whole foods. And that kind of includes like not eating cakes and bagels and things like that, because like, don't eat anything with more than 5 ingredients on the packet for like a year and see how you feel. I bet you feel amazing. It'd be very difficult though. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, because the grocery stores are not designed for it, but I bet you'd feel incredible.
That's it. That you've just hit the nail on the head. The fewer the ingredients, the better, right? That will tell you. Like, when did we ever evolve from synthesized foods? We didn't. You know, in case you missed it, there's a massive global human cull going on at the moment, right? And it's very much down to us making choices for ourselves as to whether or not we are going to be fertile and able to reproduce and stay healthy and well longer term or not. And it's not just about the biology, it's also about our connection to our soul energy. That's another conversation.
It is. I feel like this is a starter conversation for like 8 other conversations.
Yeah. So, for those of you who listen up and are intrigued and want to know more, do please use the comments to let us know what you'd like us to talk more about. I'd love to have you on the show again. It'd be great to delve into another topic. I just love hearing you. I'm like, when I was 24, I had a baby, I had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. Did I have the confidence that you have? I'd like to think I did. You know, I know that they signed me off, like the health visitor who also had the same birthday as me, but obviously was much older. When she heard how well informed I was about the choices and decisions I was making for my daughter, which included not having the protocols that they were telling you to. My own doctor said to me, if I loved my child, I would have done, right? Lots of emotional, scary stuff if I hadn't trusted my own authority. But I remember being signed off. She said, yeah, very well informed young lady, very on wanting to do what's best for her daughter, off. And I was 22. So, you know, age is not where it's what it's about. It's about our willingness to truly trust. We talked about the gut, and the gut is this huge thing, but this innate wisdom that we can all access. We could do it through astrology, do it through lots of different ways. For now, lovely Belle, if people want to find you, how do they find you? We'll put your links, actually. We'll put your links.
Right, yeah.
YouTube.
You can put my links. I'd like to say that my YouTube is fairly new. There's not loads of videos on there. And I have just gone through some big shifts with all these retrogrades that have been happening. So I have not posted anything in a while, but I will be getting on that soon, just so everyone who goes there to have a look isn't like, oh, well, she's not posting anything. I am, you know, I'm young, I'm trying.
You're doing a great job, and I am a big champion for you. Like, you really wow me in a huge way. I'm so excited for seeing your trajectory. And what I'll say is, for anyone who I didn't mention this before, if you're on YouTube, thanks for subscribing and doing the notifications and the likes, etc., and sharing, because that's what this is all about. If you're on YouTube, head over to Starpeace Facebook page and join the community. Yay! And if you're on Facebook, please head over to YouTube. To find out anything more about what I offer as well, you can check out Rosanna Hannis and RozyGlow.com. We'll put all those links in. But essentially, I see you as a very multidimensional astrologer. I love your perspective, because we can, we come in at different points of that 12-story building, right? For want of a better word. So I'm so excited about you, Belle. I really am. And thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been waiting for this. I really wanted, it was so kismet meeting you. It was so incredible and strange and beautiful, and just they're not words to the atmosphere that we met under. It was just so incredible. It was really something special.
I agree. Well, here's to more meetings.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to.
Thank you all so much. Take care for now, and I'll see you next week with someone else.